Glad you made it back, everybody. Joe Biden has ordered a missile strike in Syria. It reportedly killed one person. It's said to be retaliation for a series of deadly attacks on one of our bases in Iraq. Meanwhile, Biden is seeking to get Iran back into the JCPOA, otherwise known as the Obama-Ayatollah nuke deal, a deal that ensures Iran will get nukes at the end of a decade, a 10-year period. Joining me now is retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, author of the book, Veterans Lament. Colonel, great to have you as always, sir. Socialists in Congress, they're trying to give Mr. Biden cover. He's taking some heat from his anti-American left, so they're criticizing him for this. But what is your take on the whole strike?
Well, the good news in all of this is they're calling it proportional. They have to, because that's part of the UN. The UN requires that a response to an attack has to be proportional. So one dead, several wounded. And of course, they're all members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or at least one of the Hezbollah militias that's operating along the Syrian-Iraq border, chose to operate on the Syrian side of it because they're trying to avoid anything that makes it in the Iraqis dangerous. The idea of what he's really intending to do is that, as you pointed out, Chris, bring us back into this so-called JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And of course, the Europeans love that idea because it gives them the out of saying, well, we're just trying to negotiate and diplomacy is what we're after. The bottom line of it is the JCPOA was fatally flawed right from the very beginning. The maximum pressure campaign brought by the Trump administration was much more likely to get the Ayatollahs to do what they needed to do to make sure that their country could survive. The bottom line of it is the Abraham Accords that were put together by the Trump administration, a remarkably historic event that was pulled together primarily by his son-in-law. And that plan was based on the fact that the number one adversary for them in that part of the world is Iran. And so that plan depends on the United States maintaining pressure on the Iranians.
You're right. Peace was breaking out in the Middle East, and here comes Joe Biden. He's going to turn that all around real fast. While this little distraction is going on, who's minding the store on China's dangerous military expansion?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because there's an overt connection with the Ayatollahs between Xi Jinping and the People's Republic of China, but there's also a covert part of what's going on. And what Xi Jinping is doing is he has worked a deal with the Iranian Ayatollahs, this theocracy dictatorship that rules a significant part of the territory over there, to give them the means of building nuclear weapons and the means of delivering them. Now, the JCPOA expires essentially in 2025. And so you've got essentially a little bit of time in which you might be able to negotiate a better deal. Why would they want to in Tehran? Why would they want to start limiting their ICBMs, limiting their ability to build nuclear weapons, and carrying out the kinds of terrorism that was part of the attack on our embassy and on the airfield out in Erbil back in the 15th of the month? The ideas of the Iranians and the PRC regime is to give America something else to worry about in the long run. Bottom line of it is, JCPOA was a bad deal then, it'll be a bad deal tomorrow.
Absolutely. And you know what? In that deal, folks, the United States called on the Iranians not to develop intercontinental ballistic missile technology, never prohibited it. That's why Mr. Kerry was working to undermine the Trump administration, I believe in violation of several of our laws. But anyway, Colonel, I only got about 60 seconds left, but I wanted you to comment on this. Our military barely survived Obama. How worried are you about Obama's third term and Mr. Biden about our military?
Well, Chris, you were kind enough to show that book, the veterans of the Armed Forces of the United States, 500 of them that we interviewed for that book, are all deeply concerned about that. Under the table now, they're talking about tightening up the clearance process and the loyalty checks that Americans have to sign on to before they can become part of the Armed Forces of the United States. Clearly, he does not trust them as much as they trust our president. And the bottom line of what we're looking at is a weaker military. They're going to start looking at weapon systems. They've already withheld some weapons that were already purchased by the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates. They're looking at the possibility of the Houthis being given a free rein, which are directly supported by the regime in Tehran. And if you look at those kinds of things happening, you got to wonder, Are we going to be able to sustain a military that is capable of deterring war, the number one purpose in having the military, and number two, winning a war if we have to fight one, particularly if it becomes a two-front war because of the deals being worked out by the People's Republic of China and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is essentially running all of Iran.
Yep, and we can't forget Russia, where they factor into all of this. Colonel, it is always a pleasure talking with you, sir. Come back again soon. Thank you very much.